All right, time to talk some USC football with the Trojans getting started in week one against a tough Fresno State bunch out of the Mountain West Conference. We've got Alicia De Artola on the line from Reign of Troy. Alicia, how you doing this afternoon?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I am doing just fine. We got a little taste of football last weekend, but everybody dives into play this weekend. And of course, it's Labor Day weekend. So we get Thursday football all the way through Monday night. But USC and Fresno State go at the Coliseum on Saturday. We talked to you maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago. So do you feel any differently about this football team having gone through fall camp, whether that be for the better or for the worse?
I think I'm stuck in neutral. I think that there are the same things that there were to like about spring camp are still there. They're not as fresh, so maybe they're a little bit more not quite sure how positive they are. I wish that I had been able to come out of fall camp and said that JT Daniels is the quarterback, super confident about that. USC is going to be fine at that position. Fall camp was slightly lackluster when it came to the quarterbacks. Not that they were bad, but none of them were super impressive. And so I'm a little bit more wary of them. But that's the kind of thing where you really aren't going to know what JT and this offense are going to be able to do until the season starts. So that's what's exciting about the season starting is all of those little questions and the back and forths and the am I being optimistic or pessimistic? It all goes back to, well, we're going to find out on Saturday what they actually look like in live play.
So, Alicia, if we put it all together, and correct me if I'm wrong, the secondary is a bit thin, but in terms of standouts and certainly wide receiver are strengths. Maybe the line play not so much on either side of the ball, or where do we stand in the trenches?
Well, wide receiver is definitely the strength of the team, and defensive line could be the strength of the defense. They weren't particularly great last year, but they were breaking in quite a few redshirt freshmen, guys who were playing their first season as starters, and they've transitioned this offseason to a bigger defensive front that is designed to maybe play the run a little bit better, which was one of their weaknesses. And there are reasons to think that these guys that were in their first year as starters can take that next step in year two on that defensive front. They return just about everybody, so that's positive. And you sort of, if you want to think about being a year older, being a year more experienced, being a year of different coaching, having a different strength and conditioning program that is really focused on, eating, making weight, being strong, all of those kinds of things, that I think you can look at the defensive line and say, with a certain amount of certainty that they will be better than last year. It's just how much better than last year, because they have the capability. All of the guys on that line were big time recruits that USC brought in. You're even adding a new recruit, Drake Jackson, who is getting compared to Leonard Williams at this stage, to Rasheem Green at this stage. So if that all comes to fruition, then the defensive line will actually be arguably the strength of the defense. But they do have to take that step forward, where the secondary is just a whole big question mark. Lots of guys that you feel really good about, but there is zero depth there and zero certainty, because you really haven't seen any of them play for extended periods of time, because injuries, because red shirts, because all of those reasons.
We're catching up on USC football with Alicia De Artola. We encourage you to head over to Reign of Troy to check out her work and the rest of the staff on the Trojans. And since I've kind of set the tone in just throwing everything out there and not going in any particular order and just hitting you with anything, I guess I'll also set the tone with the offense, trying to set a tone that's going to be much different than what we've seen in the past. So when I think air raid, I think a number of things. I think that can speak to the amount of passing in terms of run-pass ratio. That speaks to the spacing on the field of having 4 and 5 wide receiver sets, no tight end, no fullback, etc. That also speaks to tempo in terms of trying to speed up the game and get in a lot of plays. So how much of that are we going to see versus maybe not necessarily the crazy air raids that we see traditionally at Houston, Texas Tech, Washington State, because they still have some running backs, and championship teams got to run the ball.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about this air raid is you could almost call it a faux air raid. I think that Graham Harrell has taken a lot of air raid concepts and built them into his Graham Harrell offense, which does want to run the ball. At North Texas, they were more or less balanced in terms of using their running backs, not just out of the backfield, but running the ball with those running backs. And even Clay Helton, when you ask him about this offense, he kind of shies away from like the air raid tag, because this won't be what you see from Mike Leach. They will throw the ball if the defense asks them to throw the ball. If the defense stacks the box, then they're not going to run into the box. So a lot of it will be dependent on just the triggers that are built into this offense to get the most out of what defense that they're facing. They're going to go to the receiver that's open. They're going to run the ball when the numbers advantage is there. And when it comes to personnel groupings, that's the other really interesting thing is in spring and fall camp. Yeah, we've seen 4 wide receiver sets, but they haven't been exclusively 4 or 5 wide receiver sets. The tight end has almost always been on the field. We've seen formations with 2 running backs. We've seen a lot of different personnel groupings. And so I think that this offense is going to have a lot of variety that will resemble air raid concepts. Certainly when it comes to spacing, like you said, the kind of routes, the spacing, the concepts are going to be there. But this isn't going to be an offense that looks unfamiliar from a pre-snap situation, because you're going to see the tight end. Now, you might see the tight end split out more often because you have someone like Josh Fallow, who is a receiving tight end weapon. You're going to have running backs on the field. You're not going to see empty backfield very often. So things will look very similar. The hope is that the concepts that they're then running, where they're going with the ball, when they're going with the ball, the pace that they're moving the ball will be slightly different. And that's, again, what we're going to find out more of in against Fresno State in the season opener is how much all of those things are going to change, because there's only so much you can tell in practice. So much of practice is scripted. So much of practice is we're doing this thing on this day and this thing on this day. So even people who've been watching practice all off season are a little bit in the dark as to how this is actually going to function.
Now, Alicia, between Malepeai and Carr, how do you see that time being split and the amount of carries?
That is the big question. I think Vavai Malepeai is the number 1 running back. Just the conversations that I've had with Mike Jinks, USC's new running backs coach, he loves Vavai Malepeai. And Vi has been injured in fall camp, dealing with a little knee sprain. So we haven't seen a ton of him, but I think he will be the first guy that's out there. And if you look at North Texas's numbers last year, they had a featured back. The featured back in that offense was getting 16, 17 carries a game. When you look at Mike Jinks, the running backs coach, in his past stints coaching the air raid with Cliff Kingsbury and in his past things, he has preferred a featured back, 18, 19 carries for a running back, or touches, I guess, in this offense, because you will see them receiving passes out of the backfield. So I am inclined to think that you'll see someone like Vavai Malepeai get 15 touches, 15 runs, and then Stephen Carr will clean up with, I don't know, let's be super generous and say they're going to run a reasonable amount against Fresno State. That might not actually happen, but let's say Stephen Carr gets, 8 or 9 and a couple catches out of the backfield, and Marquise Stepp gets 4 or 5 and maybe a touch out of the backfield. So if you're looking at it and you want to say that USC is going to have 40 running back touches in this game, that might happen. It might be less. Then Vavai Malepeai, I think, will probably get the bulk of those.
Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down USC and Fresno State as we enter 2019 and get you set for as many week 1 matchups as we can possibly get to. We got Alicia De Artola on the line from Reign of Troy. We want to invite you to the offer that we have down in the description section below, where if you grab the link next to the hashtag Sam Strong, it's for a worthy cause. I've explained it elsewhere. It's a combination of a number of YouTubers getting together with St. Jude's Hospital, also betnow.eu for cancer research, and to help support Sam, the son of Volunteer Roadshow Bobby Miller. So you get to 50%. No, actually, the graphic's wrong. Now they're telling me 100% added to your account. So if you throw in $100 to start your betting account, you get an additional $100 added onto it, and use the promo code MRTVCFB. Fresno State, Alicia, of course, based on the way they approach their scheduling, very familiar with the Pac-12. 2 wins against the conference last year against Arizona State in the bowl game, and earlier against UCLA. So they're not going to be an easy out, but this may not necessarily be the same Fresno State team we saw run through the Mountain West last year, barely lose to Boise State, avenge that loss in the conference championship game. Marcus Marion moves on as a quarterback who was one of the most prolific in the history of the program. They lose a ton at wide receiver. Your thoughts about Fresno State as you've kind of prepped them throughout the week?
Yeah, it feels a lot like USC the last time they played Fresno State. They played them in the bowl game, and then they got them in the season opener the next year in 2014, and that team was totally different. They'd lost pretty much their, star quarterback, star wide receiver, everything like that. And so this team also feels very, very unknown. Also a little bit like the Western Michigan team that USC faced a couple of years in their season opener, where you get this well-coached, well-drilled, successful group of 5 team, but you're also getting them with replacements across the board. I think they rank 129th in returning production from last year. Quarterback gone, wide receivers all gone. They get their running back and their tight end back, but the offensive line, 4 out of 5 starters are gone. That's a huge deal. On defense, that defense was outstanding last year. It's part of the big reason why they were ranked highly in all the analytics. They lose the entire linebacker core. They lose half of their secondary. So there are a lot of gaps to fill, and it's not certain that the players who are going to come in and replace those guys who led them to that conference championship, if they're going to be on the same level, especially in week 1. Maybe they'll be on the same level in week 6, but in week 1, there's a whole lot of guys that you're going to be breaking in, first-time starters, and that is the biggest concern I have from a Fresno State perspective. Is if you're going to be breaking in a ton of new starters, and you're going up against a USC team that is also in a similar boat where they're replacing a lot of starters and they have a lot of unknowns, all things being equal, USC has a clear talent advantage. So it's going to come down to Jeff Tedford proving that he can outcoach Clay Helton, which, that is a possibility. I'm not going to say it's not possible.
He's going to have to really outcoach him.
But Jeff Tedford pulling this off, especially with he lost his offensive coordinator, Kalen DeBoer, who I'm a big fan of. He went to Indiana. So not only are they replacing quarterback, wide receivers, everything that made their offense tick last year, but the guy who was running the show is also gone. So this is going to be a big, big task for Jeff Tedford, but he's not exactly the coach that if you're USC and you're recovering from 5-7 and you're in need of showing that you've got, more of a pulse in 2019. I don't know that Jeff Tedford is the ideal coach to go up against because he's so experienced, because he's so proven, because he's going to have his team at a minimum well-drilled. There's not going to be a dumpster fire of a Fresno State team. So USC is going to have to be prepared to take them on, even though they will have clear advantages in a lot of areas.
Yeah, it's been a group of 5 program, both historically and recently, that's been very good, certainly in the top 10 rankings, but not elite like Boise State. They're always going to win 10 or 11 games, or what we've seen out of UCF the last couple of years. Typically, there's a lot of 8-4s, 9-3s, and then they cycle through where they have a team like they did last year. They string together a 12-win season. They're extremely good, but man, they might have a little bit of a downturn. They're still going to be good. They're still going to be difficult to deal with. Like you say, most likely down the stretch of the conference schedule, once these kids get some game reps in. Back to USC, the air raid is the obvious storyline. But Alicia, in addition to that, any particular facets of what we're going to see on Saturday that you're fascinated to see yourself, or particular players that hey, this kid's got a big billing coming out of high school, I want to see him on the field, or maybe he's been in the program for a few years, but it's his time to step up, that you're interested to see respond to live bullets for the first time, or one of the first few times?
I am very intrigued by USC secondary. I have been saying all offseason, if you just put on paper the 5 that USC is going to have out there, the 5, I've sort of broken it down into the core 7 that I think are going to see playing time for USC. That's starters at safety, Isaiah Polamau, Talanoa Hufanga. At corner, you're probably going to see Isaac Taylor-Stewart, Elijah Griffin, Chris Steele. And at nickelback, you're going to see Chase Williams and Greg Johnson. All 7 of those guys are top 150 prospects coming out of high school. So On paper, you tell me that's USC's starting lineup, and I'm like, huh, that's pretty good. If they were more experienced, you'd feel very good about that secondary. You'd feel very strongly that secondary is gonna jive. But they're all inexperienced. They're all coming off of injury. None of them have ever played together. They've only practiced together and more briefly than you'd like them to, because half of them weren't available during spring camp because they were all injured. So you have literally 3 weeks of fall camp, 2 weeks of fall camp, mock game week, and then this game week of them actually working together all as a unit. That's not a lot of time to build the kind of chemistry and understanding and trust level that you want from your secondary. So this could go very, very well for USC or very, very poorly for USC. And I'm most intrigued about that. Fresno State isn't necessarily going to be the best test because Fresno State is breaking in an entirely new receiving core as well. So there will be other tests down the line where you look at them and go, like, those are really established receiving cores. How does this, or passing attacks, how does this secondary cope with that? But in this first game, that is the thing that I'm most intrigued by, because I really like what I've seen from Isaac Taylor Stewart in practice. I really like what I've seen from Elijah Griffin and Chris Steele in practice. I know that Talanoa Hufanga can be great because we saw him be great briefly in 2018 when he was starting as a true freshman before he got injured. And we know that Isaiah Polamau has that something about him that he looked good in the one game that he was able to play in 2018. But can they all put them all together? They're all going to be learning as a group. There are no veterans in there who can carry the load, who can provide stability. They're just getting thrown out there, and they're going to sink or they're going to swim. And I'm excited to at least know which way that's going to go.
Yeah, the KJ Costellos and Justin Herberts and Ian Books and their receiving cores are coming on down the line. We've talked about that first 6 games and what a brutal stretch it is for USC. So this is a must-win to put in the book as a pretty substantial 2-touchdown favorite against Fresno State. Alicia De-Artolo on the line from Reign of Troy, helping us out with USC football. I probably contact and drive Alicia crazy with 2 or 3 tweets or direct messages a week to try to bring her in, because you can hear the wealth of knowledge on USC football. She's all over it, but I know you're running around trying to get everything done. So I appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, for sure. I'll always love coming on. And yeah, I feel bad because I'll get a tweet, I'll get a message from you, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so busy. Where can I carve out some time? Because it is fun to come on. But we find little pockets of space here or there where I can breathe and yeah, unload.
Thanks, Alicia. Enjoy the game, and we'll see what happens with this football team. It's going to be fascinating.
It will indeed.
Thanks, Alicia. Appreciate that.